from the African American culture, they really like these. So I buy them. If they want them, here you go. I'll buy them for them. But anyway, what's interesting, I look back at the funeral homes through the years that I've noticed, and who spent money advertising and who didn't. And the reason you could tell is because there's a whole bunch of Martin Tierman stuff. Martin Tierman must have been crazy about advertising and stuff. They had clocks and thermometers and radios, and I've seen everything. But ironically, who didn't advertise, I'd probably found anything, was Cross Funeral Home, the building I own. Nada. I mean, once in a great while, it's like gold to find signs that says Cross Funeral Home. So, but the other funeral homes, and I have things from many, many funeral homes in the Wabash Valley up here. But anyway, so that's how that worked. Gillis Funeral Home. Interesting story about Gillis. Everybody remember Gillis Funeral Home? Okay. It was on campus. It was at 8th and Cherry. Big, beautiful old building. It was cool. Well, they were kind of forced out by ISU, I think, basically. I'm not speaking for the Gillises, but I'm pretty sure that's how that happened. And so they went and built on South 7th Street, just south of Regional Hospital, the other side of Thompson Ditch there. A nice contemporary building in the late 60s or mid-70s, probably. No. And Mike Gillis was the generation at that point. But at one time, Gillis Funeral Home, they were the numbers funeral home in Terre Haute. They did 400 and 500 funerals a year. They were the people to be, they were the funeral home to be, so to speak. And it's funny, when I have looked at that giant list and this list to see how, and I'll be one of those numbers one day for sure too. So I'm not being arrogant or cocky about it, it's just the way it works. And I'm very fortunate today, but someday I may not be so fortunate. But anyway, the Gillises, that's how that worked, and that business slowly kind of just closed down. And then who bought Gillis Funeral Home? Keychain on the little. Who bought Gillis Funeral Home? Guys, you come on now. I'm really disappointed. Nope. Now think back. It was called, the name of it, we'll call it Acme Funeral Home South for a few years. You guys, I'm really disappointed. Joe Callahan bought it. Had it about 10 years and sold it. And that building flooded 5 or 6 years ago. We had the big flood. That building flooded. Yes, there was a counseling center. It's been all kinds of things. But it was really a neat funeral home inside. It was very dated today. It was 1970s, but it was neat. Thomas Funeral Home. Thomas is a neighbor of mine up at 12 Points. Thomas Funeral Home has been in business a very long time. It sold Mike Butts. Mike's a good friend of mine. Mike sold that funeral home to SCI, the funeral corporation, many years ago, and retired. They are still in business, not a big player anymore. But, it's how they cycle. But Thomas Funeral Home is still in existence. And let's see, at Bell Funeral Home. Yes, it was originally Bell, then it was Bell and Bracken. Okay, yeah. And they were mainly an African-American funeral home. And historically, from what I found, and someone may correct me as far as African-American funeral homes in Vigo County, there was Bell and Bracken, there was Russell, and then one I discovered was Nash and Williams. I'd never heard of that. And so today, the Russell building is still standing, but it's really not operating a funeral home. So there is not a particular African-American funeral operating in Terre Haute. Bedino's. What was the original name of Bedino and... No. I'm not saying you're not right, but there's a keychain involved here, and that's not going to get it, so... Yeah, my information said Bedino and Black. There's a gentleman named Thomas Black.
There was Rogerson, and then Whale came in with Rogerson, and I thought Rogerson sold it to Bedino.
Well, I think they probably did, but Bedino, when they started to be able to purchase those, was originally Bedino and Black. Mr. Black went away, because see, a lot of these people had partners that went away. Cross had a partner, Cross and Brooks. He disappeared suddenly there's no Brooks. Right. Interesting. Just gone. And Bedino, I don't know where Mr. Black went. No idea. And the Bonds down in Prairie Creek had a partner. Yeah, go ahead.
Before in St. County, I was researching a cemetery, Mount County Cemetery. Plaque, funeral home plaque. Mm-hmm. funeral homes. I go on and the internet check it. They're all over the United States and other states. Where was black funeral homes in this location?
Never heard of it. Maybe it was Mr. Black Bedino's part. Well, I'm being funny, but heck, he may have put the money up for that at the time.
Black funeral homes.
Yeah, I don't know.
That was it.
What's the first name?
It was Thomas. It was Thomas Black. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. But a lot of this funeral, life obviously was different. That's a silly statement to make. We all know that. But funeral homes, obviously, you had a lot of funerals in your home. You would take grandma home and put her in the living room and all those things. I vaguely remember that going on, but that did happen a lot. So a funeral home in 1920, I'll just use that, is different than a funeral home today. It might have been a little house. It might have been a couple rooms. You'd come in and pick out your stuff and your merchandise and maybe embalm in the back, and then you'd go to over here on South 6th Street and have a funeral. So in those days, my best friend Bob and I, hey, let's open a funeral home. Okay. And there was no license at the time. We'd just say, hey, let's hang our shingle, and we also sell furniture out of the garage. And that's really the way it worked. It's the truth. So that's why there were a lot of partners. And I said, and I can't think of the name, I used to know this, DeBon Funeral Emergency started in Prairie Creek, Indiana, and it's a little house down there. The house is still standing, actually. And that was Kurt DeBon Sr. And he had a business partner, and I don't remember who it was, but when they moved but he didn't last long. So he disappeared as well. And then they moved to Terre Haute in 52, 53 on South 8th Street, and then built Spring Hill in about 89. So they're a quick history. But anyway, so they all had partners. But back to Bedino, I'm sure that they did buy that funeral home, but I think Bedino and Black. Mr. Black went away, then they bought the funeral homes you're talking about. So, and then DeBon's was on my list. DeBon's big player, had been for many, many years. Started in Prairie Creek, and I worked for DeBon's for a long time. I know the history pretty well, know the family pretty well. They worked very, very hard, and they would talk about in those early years when people didn't have any money, they took chickens and cows and all those things for payment. Right, they own New Harmony. New Harmony. That's right. Yeah, that's right. The Maddox Funeral Home, and I'm a little embarrassed to say I don't know a lot about Maddox Funeral Home. Started north, Fountainette area. Joe Maddox built the North Lafayette location in the 80s, I think. He's since retired out of the business and sold out to SCI as well. So that's it. Questions about any of these funeral homes that I've gone much longer than I thought I would. I'm sorry. Yes, sir. Yeah, and I'm not spreading gossip. I'm online here. I'm recording what I'm saying, but to my knowledge, they are not a licensed funeral home in the state of Indiana. It's just a building there, and once in a while they have a funeral, and they use somebody else's license, and I'm not getting involved in all that story, but yeah, the building is there, and there's a gentleman that lives there. Once in a great while they have a funeral, but it's licensed out of a funeral home in I want to say Lafayette, maybe, someplace like that. It's just a building. So, yeah. Yes, ma'am. Well, Dunn Family Mortuary, I know a little bit about them. Sylvester Dunn was the man's name. Sylvester actually bought the old Bell and Bracken on Crawford Street originally. He bought that and then bought my building and was there about 6 years and then just went out of business. And so Bell and Bracken moved there, and then Sylvester Dunn closed down, and he's still alive and well living in Indianapolis working for a funeral home. So that's what I know about that. It was where my building is. Yeah, well, I'll tell about my funeral home a little bit. The history of my building, anyway. Dolph and Blanche Cross and Mr. Brooks, the band that disappeared, they started the funeral home at 1202 North Lafayette in 1927, I think. It's pretty successful north side. At one time, Cross Funeral Home buried the hoity-toity of the north side of Terre Haute. And so they moved to my building in 1939. My physical building, come to find find out, was actually moved there in about 1920, from about right at the 12 points area on one of the points there. They actually, think about it, in 1920, that would have been a major event to move a big old two-story house. It wasn't brick then, but they moved it over to where I am now. And somebody told me that, and I didn't believe him. I said, no, I don't think so. But if you look in my neighborhood around there, all those are little bungalow houses except mine. And I have the big, it's out of its area, you know. So anyway, that's how that house ended up there. They bought it in 39, and the stories go, Mrs. Cross, Nadine, she's a lovely lady, she lives in Indianapolis. She has shared a few stories over the years that when they first opened up there, it was just a house. They had a body in the living room. There was one bathroom, which is still the bathroom I use, upstairs. And if people had to go to the bathroom, they went up the back stairway, this little narrow stairway, which I still use, and went up to that bathroom. That was the only bathroom. So that was 39. My building, you're probably not that familiar with it, but the back garage area, ground level, was built on post-war, maybe 47, 48. The North Chapel was built on 49, 50, and that front big lobby area is built on about 53. The Cross is owned until about 1996. Mr. Cross had cancer and passed away right after he sold it. And the interesting thing about Dick Cross was an only child, so he inherited the business from his parents, grew up there, upstairs where my office is now was his bedroom. So I think that's kind of interesting. Mr. Cross won a red Corvette through Publishers Clearinghouse right before he died. I love that story. And he traded in at downtown Cadillac when Estes Houston was still downtown underneath Seville, Cadillac Seville. So I love that. So I'm a car guy, so I love that story. So anyway, yeah, I do get that honestly from my dad. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I just bought the old B&A Electric building wherever we are down here on Walnut Street to put cars in. So yeah, so I need a wife, don't I? So that's the old Cross Funeral Home building, how that came to be. Questions you have? You guys have been great at future. I will go to the future, yes.
Besides the copy of the record of what else, what kind of information can we expect to find if we go researching that funeral?
That is a very, I looked at that, and that's a very normal page out of like those books that you girls have of mine. That's a normal page. That's going to be typical what you have today. We still, to this day, I have those big books that I buy, and every year you can go in there, it's 2009, 10, 11, 12, whatever it is. That's pretty much all funerals are going to have a standardized form like that. And that's pretty much it. Every family has a worksheet. If someone passes away, I start a folder on you tomorrow, and I get all this information. We keep those indefinitely, and I know the Bonds did as well. I think the Bonds had files back into to my knowledge, the 50s, I'm going to guess. So, yes, sir.
Are these records now all available with the library?
In the process of, I'm not sure.
All of the funeral homes in the area?
Well, I don't know. I don't think all the funeral homes know. They would have to answer that as to who. I don't know. Whose do you have and whose don't you have, I guess.
Okay, I was told that I think the records were destroyed with Mr. Hickman. You may be right, it could be part of the children, not taken out of jail. That we have volunteer homes on Martha Jones, we have Gillis records, we have Martin Cameron, we got Rogers,
Yeah, but the good news about it, they'll cross-reference, and I think one thing will lead to another, and you'll be able to find what you were. Gillis, he was Gillis. Right. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
In the mid-60s, my brother worked for Saul Corner Funeral Home as an ambulance driver. Did any of the funeral homes have, and they were in high school, had 2 high school kids going on emergency runs. Any other funeral homes?
Yes. I think every funeral home had to do their duty. Yes, ma'am.
In junior high, I went to parties at we had a party out in the chapel above the garage where the guys, I guess it was Martin that was driving the ambulance. And sometimes they would drive us and we were,
And I've heard a lot of stories like that about that. That was gone by the time but no, in the 50s, 60s, and the funeral homes went on a cycle, like for a week or a month or whatever, they were an ambulance run. And you're right, they could have been a couple college kids, and grandma's really sick in the back of this ambulance, and you've got two kids going, holy crap, what do I do? You know, but that was really the case. And Cross Funeral Home, my building, had ambulance service, and there's a little room in the back now, which I use as a clergy room, but that was the dormitory where the guys slept. And there's a bathroom and a shower back there, and that's what they used. So that's right, that was very common. Right. And I think it was kind of a competitive thing that who had the shiniest ambulance with the most sirens. Because, I'm serious, because I've seen pictures of like 56 Ford station wagons that were ambulances, and they had fancy sirens and lights. And let's say if this funeral home and this funeral home, well, I'm going to get two more lights and another fancy siren. So I think it was kind of interesting there. Yeah, that was very common. Janice. Exactly. Janice.
Can you give me an estimate on the time frame when they quit having funerals in the home? And was it because of the embalming? And are they still allowed to have a funeral inside the residence?
Well, to kind of go backwards, there's no rule or regulation about it. You give a funeral any place the law allows. There's no law that says you can't do it in my house tonight. So you could do that. I think it became less and less popular over time. I would say in the really popular to do it in the 30s, 40s, and in the 50s, lost popularity 50s, 60s. In my lifetime in this business, I've had done it twice, 2 times. So in both cases, just a son had parents had lost a son who was a teenager, from what I recall, and they wanted to bring him home. So that's what we did there. I don't think it's about embalming. I think people just don't want it in their home. Which leads into the future conversation you ask about. I think it's going to go back to that a little bit. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think it would be difficult for many homes in that time to accommodate the number of people. My grandmother was buried in 1941 from the front parlor, but she lived in a big Victorian house. And so it was also the people that wanted to have it. But World War II were big.
No, the bungalows of that time, and even the little, no, you're right there, but a big Victorian home, which many funeral homes came from there. So mine wasn't Victorian, but it was a big old house. So, yes, sir.
I'll tell you why I asked the question.
Sure.
We were in Fort Wayne, Indiana this last winter. There's a company, company, that mainly, I guess, when they're in, they set up a booth at this spring flower garden. While you walk around the park, there's a guy dressed in full marine dress, garb, and a casket. And they're sitting there going,
He was in the casket?
yeah, the guy, well, see, this company's academic.
Oh, good.
Their deal is, they'll go anywhere in Indiana, well, Indiana, I know that much, they does what you want to do. They do a funeral. They don't own a funeral home anywhere. So where are they going to keep those records?
On the internet, probably. The answer to everything. Go on, as we call it at work, the Google. So that'll take it there. But that's a good question. I don't know. But, yes, ma'am. Sir.
Yeah, you mentioned Woodlawn Cemetery. History-wise, what is the building to the immediate south as you enter Woodlawn? Is that an old office building, or is that an old...
Really close to... Never a mortuary. Right close to 3rd Street when you pull in. Yeah, it is. It's
4th Avenue and 3rd Street. That used to be where the watchman was. Okay,
Yeah.
back in the 40s.
Yeah, never a funeral home.
I grew up in that neighborhood. So
Yeah. Well, and while we're on that, let's talk about Highland Lawn, too.
I got in that cemetery and I see the building.
It's a neat old building.
You grew up where the music was.
Well, now, I don't know. let me talk about Highland Cemetery, the building real quick. That chapel in the back, beautiful old building. Everybody says, oh, that was a crematory, and that was a funeral home. It wasn't any of those things. It's been a chapel, like it is, for a very, very long time. If you slide those big, beautiful wooden doors, you see some openings, and it says door 1, 2, 3, 4, like Price is Right or something. But what that was in the winter, they would store a body there, because the winter we had last winter, we did okay with it. With backhoes and things like that, they could dig the graves. But think about it, before that, when they were all digging them by hand, they had to store the body, so that's what those were for.
And I found this out on Hill Cemetery in Clay County. There is a building there, painted white, and I actually had the maintainer of the cemetery let me in. That used to be a storage of bodies when you couldn't dig into the ground.
Same thing. Yeah, same thing. Sir, I'm sorry, I've ignored you back here.
What are the laws as far as disposal of remains?
Okay. A common question.
Well, very bluntly, my mother demanded to be cremated down to the point that she had 5 of her 8 children witnessed her being put into the machine with door closed, the gas tank to arrange that. She wanted her remains to be put in the Wabash River at Atherton, Indiana. She grew up my house there.
Yeah.
And her earliest memories were looking over the side of the house on the river. And she said, I ate fish there all my young life, now the fish eat me. And one of my brothers, when the time came, asked could we call the EPA. And I said, definitely, after we do it.
Beg for forgiveness, yeah.
Beg for forgiveness is a problem with all men involved.
You didn't need to. You were legal. You could do that. You can spread them in a moving body of water. You could spread them in the Wabash River. You could spread them in Honey Creek. You cannot go to Deming Park and put them in the pond. It's not a moving body of water. So that was legal, to answer your question. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm going to report you anyway. So.
I don't know what Indiana's laws are, but a good friend of mine, his family well, his father was in his late 80s, and he had prearranged his funeral and everything. And Jim called me up and said, Dad's dead. He died sometime last night. Went over to his house and he didn't call me. And he had passed away sitting in his chair. Well, Jim didn't think anything about it, so he just picked him up, carried him outside, put him in the pickup truck, sat him up in the front seat, and he opened him in, and drove him to the funeral home, carried him right in the front door.
Yeah.
In the state of Illinois, they really frown.
Yes. Most states, most organized states. Yeah.
People think that they're arrested and they brought the charges.
Yeah. Ignorance is bliss a lot of times. So. No, I mean, if someone, let's say you go home and Great Aunt Edith has passed away on the couch. If Great Aunt Edith has been doctoring with Dr. Jones, just get over to the doctor and they'll say, I will sign a death certificate. If funeral home will not, so if I got a call tonight and Great Aunt Edith died and they said, oh, well, she never doctored, I don't know what we're going to do. Well, I'm not going to take that body out of that house. That's when you call the coroner. But don't always jump and call 911. Just call police and say, Great Aunt Edith has died. They'll send the coroner out. The coroner will look around and decide whether it's, if she was 104 and, probably there's not foul play there. If she was 34, healthy, and they found her, with blood around her head, and the husband said, oh, nothing's wrong, So, they probably better call the coroner. So. Exactly. Like was a cauldron? Yeah. So, yes, ma'am.
That's the way it's supposed to go. When my father,
It's supposed to go in a perfect world.
family doctor, refused to sign a death certificate, and the coroner refused to get involved. So it turned out that I didn't realize it at the time, but as the funeral home was interviewing about when he might have died, he was found by a nurse that was taking care of my mom. It turned out that I made up his death certificate.
Anyway, well, go back went to the corner. When was this and where was this?
1989 Fair House.
And the coroner would not get involved?
Nope, because I went later after my grief and confronted about it. And he basically said I didn't have to.
Right, he really did.
Yeah.
And it goes to the county health officer is over the corner.
Day of death. Because it occurred around midnight. So I just said, well, let's make it June 14th.
Yeah.
Or 13th.
Yeah.
Because the VCR team had gone through and they were trying to guess about what happened.
And sometimes that's how you do it.
Yeah.
And a doctor would do that too. When's the last time you talked to Grandma?
No idea that I was writing his death certificate.
Sorry that happened like that. That shouldn't have happened. It is horrible. That shouldn't have happened that way. Who's the only person that can arrest the sheriff? Coroner, you get a keychain. All right. And then the coroner can do it. Nobody knows that. Good for this crowd. So, there you go.
Thank you, kind sir.
Okay, other questions. It's almost 8 o'clock, and we've gone longer than I ever dreamed. So,
You did great.
thanks. Go ahead. Yes.
I've got a picture, of course it's the St. Andrew's Romanian Orthodox Church, and the casket is open, and there's a picture there of the person lying in the casket. Is this an ethnic thing, or is this...
It was very common back then to have photos of the dead. Very common.
And about what time did that start out?
Well, I still have people go in and take pictures of Grandma, so it still happens. Not very often. But back then they'd take pictures. And kind of on the same thing, I did bring something, the memory folders, I call them, we have now. If you go to a funeral, you pick them up at the register book, and you open them up, and they've got a verse and a picture and all that stuff. Well, it used to be real serious stuff. And I brought one, and this is actually my great-great-grandfather, Fred Fox. But anyway, this is what they used to look like. They were major, and when I first started at Bonds, in the basement of Idaho Street, there was a big printing press. And they had actually printed those one at a time, the printing press like this. Now it's all done on a computer. We do them in-house at my funeral. But anyway, that was an old card. But a lot of these had pictures on them of the deceased.
But I've seen some where the person was standing up and the person...
Yeah, and they would put him in a coffin, probably. And they would lean him up like against that, probably like that. That's right. And then the family would all get close to him. Yeah. No, I know. I'm just the messenger, but yes, it happened. Yes, ma'am.
Most of the people think you're buried with.
Well, I have a great cat story. And if my staff were here, they would leave the room right now. Should I tell this story? Let me think if I should tell this story. Yeah, it was pretty funny. A lady died who was a very, very nice family. Gal died. I think she was mildly mentally handicapped. And the family brought in this, looked like a stuffed cat. It was, and I knew it wasn't a real cat, but it was an animated cat. And they said, no, this, Susie Q loved this cat. We want the cat in the casket. I said, sure. And we put, to answer your question, fishing rods, beer, cigarettes, money, cake, alcohol, probably illegal things that I've never seen. So I don't want some things you just don't want to know. So anyway, but this cat, so they brought the cat in, and it was in a bag, and I was getting ready, and I'm the person that does all the fixing in the casket, and that's because I'm a neat freak, and I'm all about that. So I get the cat out, and it was kind of, we were laughing about the cat, honestly. It was kind of funny, because it looks just like a cat. Well, wait a minute. Kind of. You're on the right. You may get a keychain out of this story. An ink pen. Anyway, so they said, well, it normally is animated, but it doesn't work. And there was a switch, and you turn it on, and it was supposed to be bad at the eyes and go like this. Well, they said it didn't work. So I just turned it on. I just set it there, and I was kind of playing with it and touched it, and all of a sudden it rolls over in its back, and it goes... Well, I wasn't scared at all, but a coworker of mine and I just fell to the floor laughing. And we laughed and we laughed and we laughed and we laughed. So anyway, the story gets better. So I shut the button off, put it in the casket, and we buried out at Denison, Illinois, Dunlap Cemetery. The lady's buried out there. Super nice family. So my coworker, this young man that works for me, was freaked out by that cat. So we get back to the office. He goes, "Oh, I'm so glad that darn cat's in the ground. That thing just freaked me out." So I thought, It's amazing what you can find on the Google. So I found the exact cat. Its name was Lulu. It was $39, and I ordered it. And so a few days later, I had it sent to my house. So Lulu came. It's the exact same cat. So I have the cat, and I get the batteries in it, and it's exactly the same thing. So I don't know, at the appropriate time, it was late on a Friday, we were all tired, and my coworker was in the other office, and there my office is right next to it, and Michelle, my office manager, she knew I had the cat. So he was complaining about something, and so I had my little glasses. I wear contacts now, but I had glasses on, and I kind of dropped them down here, and I get the cat out, and I'm like this, and like my best Truman Capote voice, and his name is Brock, a nice young man. I walk around the corner and I go, "Brock, you have a visitor." So he goes, "I thought you buried that cat." And so then, one more part of the story, and I'm done, I promise. So he was leaving on vacation. So I took pictures. I still have it on my phone, wherever my phone is. I took pictures of the cat doing all kinds of fun things and sent them to him on his phone constantly. I go to MCL every morning and get a big glass of iced tea. So Lulu, the cat, went to MCL, and I took a picture of her on the counter. And in Brock's office chair, in the front seat of my car. So this went on for like 5 days, and he finally said, "Stop." So that's the weirdest thing I've ever buried. Long answer, short question. I've had the best time, and I hope you've learned something. And I've learned a lot of things, so I appreciate it. Thank you so much, and I hope the weather is great.